Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. Okay, I'm going to continue talking about the Franciscan school of theology and why it really resonates with me. I left off talking about how in the late 19th and early 20th century, the church really kind of pushed Thomism, which would be the theology and philosophy of Blessed John Duns Scotus. Of the philosophy and theology of St. Thomas Aquinas. And I've heard some reasons for why this was done. I've never studied it particularly, but with at least at the beginning or the end of the 18th century with the French Revolution, and then all of the subsequent upheavals that occurred in Europe after that, all the stuff with Napoleon, the downfall of lots of monarchies, then getting into the latter part of the 19th century, the Papal States were losing land left and right. And there was even a point in time, I think it was about 20 years, maybe 19... I think it was either during World War I or a little before, a little after, where the Papal States totally lost land to Italy. And it wasn't until Mussolini, actually, Mussolini gave them the little plot of land that is currently the Vatican State, so to be its own sovereign nation. So the church was losing property, losing land, losing just incredible amounts of influence that it had been accustomed to for the past, probably since the Western Church has had its prominence since about the time of Charlemagne, so the 800s AD. The Eastern Church had prominence, at least politically, from the time of Constantine until the sack of Constantinople in 1209. So, each side had its very large chunk of time where it was both a spiritual and political power. Okay. So it was quite an adjustment, I think, for the church to make after losing all of the land, all of the political kind of clout that it had gained over basically 1,000 years, 800s until the 1800s. It had been quite a large political power. And that caused a lot of good, and it also caused a lot of bad. So, just like with anything, there's goods and positives and negatives to it. Protestants have this in their history as well, to certain extents. John Calvin basically ran an entire city for a large portion of his life, and even had power of execution over certain individuals. That's a topic I don't know a ton about, so I'm not going to try to delve into it too much. I'm not going to try to make too many claims there, but if you want to look it up, it's something that happened. With Protestants and Catholics and Orthodox, there's been bloodshed on every side, and it's difficult to blame any one side in particular. I think we are all fallen creatures. Anyway, that was quite a long tangent. I apologize. So the Catholic Church, because of in large reason, because of losing so much status, not only politically but then also spiritually, in the sense that people didn't trust the church as much in most of most of Europe. So, and there was quite a bit of theological dissent, you could say. There was the biblical, historical, critical method that was coming out with people like Julius Wellhausen and others. I've mentioned that in the podcast on biblical criticism. And there was the modernist heresy, basically, that had been brewing and growing in its power and influence since a little before the French Revolution. There was also what's called Catholic liberalism, which was connected to modernism, but is in a lot of ways different than it. I think I've heard people say that Catholic liberalism is kind of more of a subset of modernism. So basically the idea of beginning to kind of deny miracles and supernatural things, and the Catholic liberals, I think, as opposed to the modernists, were quite they cherished the liturgy, but for the wrong reasons. It wasn't always for the sake of glorifying God and for valuing the beauty, because beauty reflects the nature of God in certain ways. But they cherished it because of the just basically the history of it and the more secular, mundane kind of reasons. So there's that going on. So the church is beginning to really feel the loss of Christendom, I guess is what I'm getting at. And Thomism, the philosophy and theology of St. Thomas Aquinas, really gave and continues to give the church a very clear, systematic understanding of philosophy and theology. Thomas is incredibly clear and systematic, whereas the more the thinkers in the Franciscan school, let's just take Bonaventure and Scotus, for example. Bonaventure, I would say, is not as systematic. He's more fluid than Thomas. He has that more Augustinian, Platonic, Neoplatonic bent to him, instead of the Aristotelian kind of textbook style, very organized kind of a thinking, and really the emphasis of the heart above the intellect, also the emphasis of the will above the intellect. So voluntarism, you could say, which I think has been quite misunderstood in at least a lot of modern Catholic and modern secular people that I've encountered. But I'll get to that in a bit about voluntarism. So I think the church had good reasons for really promoting the Thomistic point of view. But when you kind of close yourself off to one theological system, that lack of intellectual freedom within the church causes issues. It causes a certain amount of rigidity, which I think is not only on a liturgical level, but also on an intellectual level. What the Second Vatican Council was trying to restore was getting away from the quote-unquote rigidity of the old liturgy and making things a little bit more fluid. So that's on a liturgical spectrum. And then Thomism, it is more rigid in the sense that it's more systematic than are many of the other theological and philosophical schools within Catholicism. Now, that rigidity, and I mean rigidity in a positive sense here. I'm not trying to use it as a trope or something negative. That rigidity is very helpful for clarity, and God knows how much the church needs clarity nowadays. So I'm not saying this was a bad thing to have happened with this promotion of Aquinas, but to the extent that it devalued the other schools of theology, I think it was a bit of an issue, and in a certain sense continues to be, because even Catholics in our present day context, if they have been catechized well and they remember their catechesis, they have learned it only from one point of view. And as children, that's a good thing, because you don't want to make things too confusing. But as kids grow up, as they enter into adolescence and adulthood, I think it's very helpful for people to understand that there are multiple different theological and philosophical frameworks that are acceptable within the bounds of Catholicity. And I think the Franciscan school is a particularly beautiful one. I think that beauty in a lot of ways is the hallmark of Franciscan school. I'd say maybe a combination of beauty and goodness, because when you think about the transcendentals, truth, goodness, and what are they? And I just read this, what was it? It was in Scotus, in one of his metaphysical treatises. He talks about how, and I've kind of had an intuition for this, and I think it's probably because of reading Bonaventure and because of learning things about the Franciscan school, and I was like, oh, that's where I got it from. Truth is reality as it's made known to the intellect. Beauty is reality as it's made known to the body, to like the corporeal part of ourselves, right? And then goodness is reality as it's made known to our wills. Our wills are primarily, they're the primary moral agent within us. We can know what's good to do, but it doesn't mean that we do it. We have to will what's good. And that's one of the main premises of the Franciscan school for putting the will above the intellect, which is what is called voluntarism. And I'm going to pick up on this in a second because I am doing a Walmart pickup right now. So I need to stop. I'll see you in a few minutes. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Card channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Catholicism Card. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all of this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.